Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unfinished Business. I have a very special guest with me this evening, Nancy Bocskor. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Absolutely. It's a beautiful day in Ohio.
Very nice. Tonight, we have a very important topic. We are going to talk about women and politics. As we all know, women are more involved in all different types of leadership positions, but we still have a long way to go with equality. I do have a couple. Well, before we start, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? I met you back in 2007 when I was a student at the campaign school at Yale University for a summer program. And you gave a few different classes on fundraising and things of that nature. It doesn't seem that long.
No, I can't believe. Yet at it used to be the Women's Campaign School at Yale. It's been rebranded as the Campaign School at Yale. And it's been around for several decades now. And it really is still the premier 1 week program in the country, training women, whether they're going to be an activist, a candidate, or a campaign worker, on how to do this better. And I think it's always been refreshing there that it's one of the few places where women's politics don't just focus on abortion. We learn about how to talk about issues, how to raise money, how to give a better speech. And so our goal is to just prepare women to lead. And besides yourself, I mean, we have had women from so many different countries. And of course, we have such success stories, whether it's Senator Gillibrand from New York, former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, and of course now Lauren Underwood from Illinois, and so we've had several alums of the program get elected to Congress. So
yes,
it's a breath of fresh air to be, and plus you just feel smart because you're walking into the Yale Law School. So I always think that was always such an exciting moment.
It was definitely one of the better programs I've ever been in. And what was nice is you had women of all different political philosophies.
Yes.
But we all had that one common experience as being women trying to break that glass ceiling, entering a field.
Yes, it's been great.
That's hard to get into. But I do have a couple statistics currently. As I'm sure you know, in 2020, there's only 101 women that are currently in the U.S. Congress out of 435 seats. So that's only 23%. We have 26 women that are in the U.S. Senate, and that's out of 100. So basically, we have 127 women out of 535 seats, which is only 23.7%, although, as you know, women are over half of the population. And then when you look at statewide elected offices, we only have 90 women that are currently holding statewide elective offices across the country. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, but I'd like to know what you think some of the hardships are as far as women breaking that glass ceiling.
Well, it is, even though we are commemorating, I always say commemorating the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, since we know that Black women really were not able to vote until the civil rights era. It was Asian women were not able to participate until the 50s, Native American women. So we are celebrating, so to speak, white women's right to vote. So, but we still need to celebrate and commemorate, because that was such a barrier. And so when women tell me, oh, it's so hard to run for office, right? I just can't do it. And I remind them, as I do when I speak in other countries, the language that was first offered in 1848 at Seneca Falls about giving women the right to vote was the same language that finally passed in 1920. I mean, it was decades and decades. And so anything worth having, it is a journey, not just a sprint. We had, and women, our foremothers, I mean, they went through beatings and force feeding and jail and humiliation from 1848 to 1920. So when women say, oh, this is just so hard, I can't do it, people are mean, I think one of the the worst part about this, many things are bad about this pandemic, but there was to be so many commemorations and celebrations and history about the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. Now they've all turned to Zoom and all of these things. There was supposed to be a huge event in Philadelphia that I had planned to go to, and I was on the committee to what the whole country was doing for 2020. So many people around us don't know what women went through. And so we were not given the right to vote. We had to fight every inch of the way. And so I remind women now that, if this was easy, everybody would be running for office. And so there are more than 517,000 elected officials in the U.S.
Right.
I mean, take that in, 517,000 elected officials. And as I like to laugh, you can even, you can run for mosquito board down in Florida, but I always remind people that you're not representing the mosquitoes, you want to kill them. So women can start out at any different level of office. And you and I were talking, at the beginning on if you want to run from office, you don't have to start for Congress. Run for school board, run for county commissioner or clerk of the district court. There are so many opportunities to get your feet wet and start building that foundation that you will feel more confident when you do run for Congress. And so a lot of I deal with this with male candidates. Male candidates wake up and go, I want to be president. Women, I'm just trying to get them to run for office. And so the barrier isn't, you can still do this at the local level if you have a strategy and a plan and fundraising and the ingredients of a campaign.
With the candidates that you've worked with throughout your career, do you find that it's harder for women to find support either from the party that they're part of or, even some groups that usually give money to that particular party? Do you find raising money is an obstacle?
So there's lots of ways. I mean, when we look at support, right? The Republican Party hates identity politics. They don't care if you're going to be the first woman. They look at it's the record. And so it's always been more difficult for a Republican woman who's running to generally get through that primary because they're not going to get support just because they're a woman. Not that Democrats are doing that, but Democrats embrace diversity and think we need different voices because everyone has different experiences. The Republican Party, and I've been in it since I was a child. It is more on what you bring to the table. So there are more women who are Republicans that they do face barriers. It may not be financial barriers. It is more your, who's raising the kids, right? Who's going to feed your kids dinner? They're really ask more of those questions, I think, than I hear from my Democratic counterparts. So I think Republicans, that is an issue. But for both parties, they tell me, oh, it's so hard to raise money. But I always think that the first step, when I meet with a candidate, tell me what you've accomplished. Because remember, people like to vote for people that gets things done. So a woman may say, oh, I'm not qualified to run for office because I'm not a CEO. I didn't finish college. There's all these, there's self-confidence issues, right?
Right.
So I then start peeling the onion back. And I find out that, oh, yes, I raised $20,000 to help kids buy backpacks for school this year, right? So they have different accomplishments. And so for a lot of my career, I've been reprogramming women to not question their achievements because it may not be the same as a man's achievements, but it's no less important. So I think that's one of the things that is when I see women as a barrier, the self-confidence is the major issue there. Any candidate, you have to sit down and tell me who you know. We have to write it down. Who's going to give you money? And so we figure that out. And statistics show that women are just fabulous at nonprofit fundraising, right?
Right.
If you want a bake sale, or you want to fund a camp, or raise money for cancer prevention, you go to a woman. And so it's for women, it's persuading them and teaching them that it's okay. You can ask for money for yourself. Don't be embarrassed, because look at how much money you've raised for other people. So I think that's is I teach fundraising, particularly to women. It's getting over that barrier that um, they don't think they're good enough to raise money for. Why should people give me money when we really need it for other things?
I find too, from being like a county chair, that society still has this image of what a quote leader looks like,
Hmm.
and a lot of times that doesn't come in a female form. Although I would argue a lot of the skills like multitasking,
Yeah,
that's something that comes to women very naturally with with everyday lives. But I agree, it's getting that confidence and knowing that you can do it, because a lot of the skill sets we already do.
absolutely. And I was thinking back to 2007 when we first met. I had been noodling for a long time and ended up creating this what I see as a path to public service. And I have found, studying women who are candidates, not just in America, but women who actually run in office for office in really difficult situations like Egypt, Jordan, places, former Soviet republics, that they are running for office because they want to fix something in the community.
Right.
I coined the phrase passion-driven leadership. That a woman, a lot of women who run have experienced a great loss, a great challenge in their community, and they are finally, they've found their voice and they want to run for office. And as we look at, the Georgia's 6th district, where and I can't believe it's Newt Gingrich's old district. It is now represented by a Black Democratic woman who ran because her son had been murdered. And we finally have to do something with gun violence. Oh, Lucy
Okay.
McBath. Lucy McBath. It came to me. My apologies. So, we have seen many women who run because they feel strongly about doing something in their community. Just like we see, whether it's AOC, now Cori Bush actually had the big
Right.
upset in St. Louis. I had interviewed her on a documentary that we were doing on Knock Down the House, and she was one of my guests. I did this for the Texas State Museum. It was it's running to make sure people have what they need, whereas men oftentimes, are running to be someone. Women are running to help someone, and I think um, it may be a stereotype, but nobody's proved me wrong yet.
Very true.
Right when I look at it.
So you started your career, you mentioned Newt Gingrich as when he was in Congress, correct?
Yes, when he was a freshman in Congress, when 1979, when I graduated from college, and he had just been elected to Congress in 78, and so I came out, and Newt is a lightning rod, and as we all say, Newt has 6 million ideas by 6 a.m. every day. Six are good, and well, the rest not so much, but more, but it's six more than most people have in a lifetime, and so he's always been about transformational leadership. But I also, when I teach men and women, the thing I learned from Newt and I've tried to live my life is his leadership model, which is listen, learn, help, lead. You listen, listen appreciatively. You know, 10 years ago, I may have asked a college woman, "Oh, what's your dream job?" Now I ask, "What's your student loan debt?" Right? Because all of a sudden, if you want to go to law school and you're sitting on $100,000 of debt and you're going to go another 150 in debt, maybe we need to go to law school at night. I mean, what are other alternatives? I told a male student recently, he said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about going to law school." And I said, "Well, what's your grad school debt?" "Well, it's, about 150. And I went, "Just go hire an attorney," right? I mean, at that point, but you listen appreciatively, whether you speak to an older voter, they'll always know more about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and those issues. So you need to listen appreciatively, and because then you learn. And you sit there and you listen, you're learning from somebody else's perspective, because we're not all the same. And so when you learn, you then figure out, okay, how can I help? What can
But
I
that's
do?
missing now. Don't you think that's missing
Right.
now?
It is.
And with the current,
It is. What can I do to help? Be the catalyst. It's like knowing who to call. Just like we all do. Thank you, Mark Zuckerberg, for inventing Facebook, because now I can keep track of friends from decades and around the world. But everybody knows somebody, and you can be such a facilitator, a catalyst in getting something done. And when you listen, learn, and help people, we almost always be asked to lead them. And I learned that at Newt's knees, right? When I was just a kid out of college. So not everyone follows that anymore. It is we always said that the internet was going to make us all smarter, and it hasn't. It is this growth of conspiracy theories, and it's amazing to me the number of people who post things that, if they sat and thought about it, they would know it's made up.
right?
But everyone questioned everyone, and I think one of my big concerns. Um, I first was sent to Moldova, which is a country over between Russia, Ukraine, and Romania. It's the smallest um, Eastern European country. It's also the poorest and most corrupt. And yet it's a gem. It has 1,600 vineyards, so it's pretty nice. But when I was sent over there by the State Department to help civic organizations learn how to ask for money, and how do you become an advocate.
Hmm.
And so I thought about, what do we have in America? And this was 2014 when I first went over. And I went, okay, it's the 3 T's. We have trust, transparency, and a history of tithing in the U.S. We always give back, right? We trust. We have, for a lot of women candidates, their most valuable asset is going to be their personal trust asset. If you ask a woman to do something, she's going to get it done. That goes back to our multitasking. If I needed a
Right.
Band-Aid right now, we'd all have a Band-Aid, right? I mean, we are just prepared for everything. I've worked in countries where you don't even trust your own neighbor, because you could have gotten turned into the KGB so you could have heat in the winter, or a better job, or a better apartment. In America, we always had that trust asset. Now that worries me, even though it is still higher than most places in the world. We're not trusting people anymore. And part of that is the bad actors. It's the Chinese, it's the Russians, putting out misinformation on the internet. So we trust, transparency, learn to love a spreadsheet. Um, we have campaign finance laws for a reason. I've had students tell me, oh, Nancy, that the most corrupt people in our country are going to win an election because they buy off everyone. I hear about the bags of cash in elections in Bangladesh. We have accountability here. You even have, um, you know, um, 2 former governors went to prison, right?
Right.
One of them was pardoned, but we have campaign finance laws here because you think you're going to get away with something and you're not. My gosh, there is a case here in Ohio where the Speaker of the House, it was a $60 million scam. You get caught here. In most of the other places, they don't care. It's just the price of admission. So, and the third is, we've always had this history of tithing, that we always give back to other people. So people are used to giving money in the US. I say we always come out of the womb as mini fundraisers. Half of America goes to church. There's a lot of that is in our upbringing. We all, whether it's selling Girl Scout cookies, Sally Foster wrapping paper, we are used to giving to people in need. If there's an earthquake in Haiti, we step up. Now we just have to pivot to women and persuade them. People are used to giving. You just have to have a strong case of support, and a compelling story about why somebody should give to you. Um,
Well, outside of elected positions, there's other leadership positions. There's party positions, positions on campaigns. A lot of times they go to, I see, not all the time, but I find a lot of times they go to young male campaign staffers, especially right out of school, your field positions. So, what are some ways that you can see that women can get involved? Maybe they don't want to be the candidate, but they still want to be involved. one of the things that interests me, I had mentioned to you, is you had mentioned if you want to get involved with politics, you have to leave DC, and that really caught my eye because most people think they have to go to DC. So why do you feel as though you have to leave DC to really be successful?
I think that, and I look back at my career and my friends' careers, and some of them are like Jen Sarver down in Austin, Texas, who actually moved home and ultimately ran for Congress in 2018 in the primary. Um, you go to DC, you build a network, you figure out, okay, who do I need to call? But it is a bubble. It is a bubble. And earlier in my career, when I looked around and my best friend, I was in her wedding, we've been friends forever. We looked around and almost all the field staff, the higher ups, the chiefs of staffs on Capitol Hill, they were all men. And
Right.
what was it they had done? They had managed a political campaign, or they had run a state party. And so for many women, they get in that comfortable bubble of DC. And yet, and they all sit around and go, why am I not a chief of staff? Why am I not a field director? It's because you have to leave that and go prove you can do something. I used to
Okay.
laughingly go, you need to go get in your car and drive out to bumfuck Kansas and manage a campaign. Because when you see young men that are under 25 who are chief of staff, it's almost always because they went out and took a chance on this candidate and moved somewhere in America for a year or so and managed a candidate who ended up getting elected to Congress. So there were always so many reasons. I don't want to leave my boyfriend. Who's going to pay for my health insurance? I mean, there were a lot of questions because for many women, men are better risk takers, right? Now, that's good or bad. It means that's why they end up in the emergency room because they're a risk taker, but they also manage a higher level of risk. And running for office is a risk.
Right.
And when you are a woman running, you are open to insults, your children being made fun of. And as mothers and as women, we are the caretakers. And I always suggest you need to sit down with your family and say, this is what's going to happen, and try to prepare them for the ugliness that is the world.
What about women of color? Because you have that extra layer on of not just gender, but also race, as far as getting these candidates to take a risk on you because of the stereotypes that we have and biases we have in society. How do you get someone to take a risk on you if you are willing to move?
I think that for many women of color, they need to go. Their strength is in the church, and I think sometimes that they are very involved in their church, but they are very reluctant to cross that barrier and go, I need you to help me.
Okay.
And so I think that we all have our own, I call the spheres of influence. Tell me what where'd you go to college? Where'd you go to high school? Were you in a sorority or fraternity? Were you in the black sororities across the country? We've certainly seen that with vice presidential candidate Harris, right?
Right.
Did you go to historical black college? So there's a lot of spheres that when I sit down is tell me who you know. Now, it's much more difficult for single working women, no matter their color, because who's going to take care of your kids while you're campaigning? You still have to earn a living. And now, where there has been some change in every state is a little bit different if you're running for local office, but there's been the local candidate here, Desiree Timms, who is running for Congress here in Ohio against Congressman Mike Turner here in Dayton, Ohio. There was some talk because her campaign paid, so she could pay her rent, right? She's not working, but you've got to pay the bills. And I think that for a long time, that was just not done. When women wanted to even bring it up, it was always denied, especially for childcare.
Right.
Because for men, there's always somebody, because, the kids aren't necessarily their responsibility. It is still, stereotypical or not, it is on our shoulders. My gosh, even in liberal California, a woman who had just given birth in California ended up taking her week-old baby to the assembly floor for a vote because she couldn't get special permission to vote remotely. And she's a Democrat in California. So if they're treating women like that, imagine what they're doing in less enlightened states.
Right.
So, but for women of color, a lot of it is, if it is raising the money because their communities may not have wealth. And so how are you going to network beyond that? For Cori Bush, that was a big issue when she ran against Congressman Clay the last time. Well, now when she was in Knock Down the House with AOC and a couple other women starred in it, this time it nationalized her race and money started coming in. So how do you elevate your campaign so people will support you? And there's more and more PACs and other organizations that are trying very hard to support diverse candidates, whether you're in the LGBTQ community, whether you are Asian. And again, that always plays better for Democrats because they support diversity more than
Right.
Republicans do.
I want to pick your brain about an issue about women not supporting other women. And I'm not saying women should support
Right.
women just because they're a woman, but if there is a qualified woman in the race, why we're the majority of the population and we vote more. So why don't we see more women in positions? Why don't we support each other?
Well, I always say a lot of this goes back to when you turn 13, right? The what I call the teenage wasteland years. We have been, we've just been so, conditioned.
Brainwashed.
Well, yeah, I was trying, conditioned. I was going to use a worse word, but brainwashed, conditioned that women are your competitors, and it has been very difficult. I had an old boss. Oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of this in a long time. In 1982, our male boss, who wasn't the big boss but the in between, basically sat us down, all these women who were working at the Republican Congressional Committee, and basically dismissed us, saying, "You women, I'll never forget, you girls are never going to succeed in politics because you didn't participate in team sports. You girls always, if you get a fight with a girl, you take your tea set and you go home. Men, they may want to kill each other out on the in a basketball game, and at the end the opponents are like going, hey, let's go drink and pick up girls." So I mean, it is this mindset, and again, the brainwashing that women see other women as competitors. And I remember I was so mad at him for saying this that I went and told his boss, as I was a tattletale, but it was so, I called out the inappropriateness of that. But having said that, as I have reflected since, I can't believe it's been almost 40 years, I see many women, because they did play in team sports, they're lifting others. We have to work so hard to elevate other women, that they're not our competitors, that we are colleagues, that we are going to fight hard. We're going to learn from our mistakes and be better the next time. Because I think competition is good. It's just that women are more stereotyped into,
Right.
it's a bad thing. So I think team sports has helped my grad students, my interns, my grad assistants. I see a different support system than I did when I was in school. So I think that 40 years has brought us this. But in terms of women supporting other women, again, unfortunately, last week at the Republican convention, there was a woman who spoke, and she was there to speak about abortion. However, her name's Abby, and all I know was, when I had never heard of her, and now I have. But her whole thing is we should have head of household voting. The man, as the in a Christian household, should be the one deciding who the woman votes for. So when you look at different, I think part of this is, where are you in faith? Where do you go on the spectrum of your Christianity or your religion? Because more conservative, don't think women should be voting. They don't think they should have a voice. So why would you support another woman when you're just voting for whoever your husband tells you to? And there are going to be a
Right.
lot of men and, men who just will never support a woman. And then they're bringing along their subservient wives telling them what to do. But I do think that we need to, people used to ask me, would you vote for any woman? I said, well, no, I will be more apt to look at a woman. I certainly want to, but I'm still going to look. We're all going to look at issues too.
Right.
I mean, there are
Right.
some Republican women who have made it through their congressional primaries that are all part of that conspiracy theory group, right? Have said many, many things that are anti-Semitic and racist, yet they made it through their primary. I'm never going to support a woman like that. And then you have other women that their core issue is abortion. Now, men don't sit around and go, this is our core issue, right? But for a woman, and with the exception of the women's campaign school, or the campaign school at Yale, Running Start, Ready to Run, a lot of programs, training programs for women, the price of entry is, where do you stand on abortion?
Yes, that's very
We
true.
don't, and men, that doesn't happen. And that's why, for me,
Well, there's
that's
different
never going to be my number
standards.
issue. Yeah, it's never going to be my number one issue. So I don't, and I'm looking for other things besides making that judgment.
You bring up a good point, because when we do our phone banking, a lot of times when we get women on the phone and we ask, will you support our candidates? And they will say, I haven't spoken to my husband yet, so I don't know who I'm voting for. So we have, which is probably why, single women tend to be more Democratic and married women tend to vote more Republican. Maybe that's the reason why we see that split among
Well,
women.
I think there's that, but I also, Kellyanne Conway, who just left the White House, I
Right.
remember hearing her speak more than a decade ago. And she said, do you want to know how to make a woman a Republican? And it was basically the 4 M's. It was marriage, maternity, mortgage, and mutual funds. That you become more conservative when you are married and have a family and worrying about, paying for a mortgage. And that was really a lot of, when we get pushback on Democratic candidates, it's, the government is not your daddy. And so when you have single women running or voting, and I think that's true for the Republican side as well, that you may need more from the government because you're not in a partnership to help reach these goals. And I think that there's a lot of Republicans that follow the Kellyanne model.
I think, and I'm going to be biased, I am a Democrat, but I do think the Democrat fosters more independence too,
Mm-hmm.
more independent thinking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that uh, unless you're running into a Democratic woman somewhere in the South, if there's any that
Right.
still exists, then I
Right.
think that's more of a, that could be more regional. I think that you're always going to have more independent thinkers in the Northeast or in elsewhere. But I've always thought that was interesting. And when people are running, conservative candidates just, rail on single women with children. You
That
keep
is
having
true.
kids and you think we should pay for it. And so I think there's that's an issue as well. But I just think that I've always said that the people we elect should reflect the community that they're running in. And so I don't think just always electing a white man who's 65 um, to represent a minority district or a district that's not more wealthy. That bothers me. So I don't want to have the dad, right? Here it is. I laugh because for a lot of Republicans, they think Democratic women want somebody to pay for their stuff. Where I'm looking that, no, you think you need to be the dad because you're a white 65-year-old man, right? and you are smarter on how to make decisions.
I do wish we could find a way to take money out of campaigns for that reason. I keep
Yeah.
thinking of the money that's going to be spent this year on races on all levels. We could actually probably fund another stimulus package for people that work with the coronavirus. When you think of all the money that's going to be spent, because we would be able to get more people that represent their community if money wasn't such a factor
A
in
barrier.
campaigns.
Um, yet when people say, "Do you support uh, the different election laws where it's state funded?" Right? I
Hmm.
wouldn't mind a credit, but I don't think that the government should be funding campaigns as long as there's kids hungry in the streets, right? I think that we need to look at our resources carefully. I am no support, I am, there's so many campaign laws that have passed, including Citizens United, the dark money in politics. That's what's sullied uh,
Yes, yes.
this. It's what has made it where, in all of this, and I love John McCain. I always said he's an old coot, but he's my old coot, and we don't have any voice in the Senate who are standing up for what's happening around the world today in places like Belarus and Hong Kong and Russia and elsewhere. And he's such a strong advocate for democracy. But John McCain, when he pushed the McCain-Feingold bill,
Right.
BICRA, like let's rein in money. Well, it had unintended consequences because there's always gonna be money in politics, and now there's so much of it that it's not regulated, and
Right.
and the law is clear. The most you can give to a candidate is 2,800 in the primary and 2,800 in the general. Well, that's what the law should be. Well, now we have super PACs where whether it's George Soros on the left or Sheldon Adelson on the right, they give millions and millions of dollars to influence elections. And
Right.
I've just, even as a fundraiser, I've just always been fundamentally against that because it does not level the playing field.
No, no, it doesn't. What's one piece of advice you would, as we start to close up, what's one piece of advice you would give to women if they wanted to get involved in politics on any level, whether a staffer, running for office, just even if they wanted to work for a legislator like you started out? What's one piece of advice you
You
would
know,
give to women?
there's a couple of quotes I always just like. Sally Ride was the one who said, um, "You can't be what you can't see."
Yeah.
Um, I always laugh that there's always these anecdotes out of these other countries that have had women as prime ministers or presidents, and a little boy will meet her and go, "Wow, I didn't know men could even be this," right? Because they grew up with seeing women. So the more women we can add in politics, it continues to be a role model for young girls. There's that quote. We have Marie Wilson, the founder of the White House Project. Add women, change everything. I may not agree with everything that a woman says, but she brings a diverse viewpoint to the table.
Right.
Always remember, mammographies were not covered under health insurance until the first year of the women in the 92 elections. Right now, one of the reasons for decades, the National Institutes of Health would fund white men having heart attacks. And now we know it's people of color, it's women are having heart attacks. But because
Mhm.
no one was there saying, there's some other people out here. So I think I love add women, change everything. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, women are just they do cooperate better. Um, whether it's the government shutdowns, and it was the women of the Senate on both sides of the aisle that opened the government back up. And then, of course, Shirley Chisholm, who
Right.
used to say, if you don't have a seat at the table, pull up your own folding chair.
Right.
And you have a right to be there. Don't let people bully you. And so, for a lot of young women who want to get involved in politics and they go to the county party and people are not treating them well, and it happens, um, I remind them that you have social media skills that these people need, right? offer to help with the Facebook, or hey, let's do TikTok, let's do Instagram.
Right.
But bring a skill. A long time ago, again, learning this growing up in Newt Gingrich world, um, people bring three things to the table: time, talent, or wisdom. So when I was younger, I had more time. I'd volunteer on a campaign. I'd go door to door. I would do all of these things. Um, then you have talent. Identify, what are you good at? Are you a good public speaker? Some people just like to ask people for money. Other people like spreadsheets, unlike me, right? But everyone has a talent.
Right.
Campaigns need talented people. And the third is, now that I'm this age, I've been there and done that. I bring some wisdom. No matter, people always tell me my district is different. No, it's not. Let's talk about fundamentals here. And I think that you need to recruit a team like this, um, and be a risk taker. If you can find another job, this is not the America of 50 years ago where somebody had the same job for 40 years and then got a gold watch. Um, as you've known, I have reinvented myself several times, because I think we can, and it means being entrepreneurial and nimble and being a risk taker. Go work on a campaign. It is life changing, and it can put you in a career, whether it's campaign management, advocacy. How do you change things in your community? And you can't just sit around, you know. If anything, and I know I'm on a roll here, but you asked me, when we go back and do some dissection of the 2020 campaign, I truly hope that the Democratic message of defunding the police is not going to be the nail in the coffin for Joe Biden. Because right now, you've got to have suburban women, and of course, we all know what Trump's doing with the dog whistles of protecting suburban women, and all of us think we're pretty protected. But when you have to explain a slogan, you've lost the argument. We all
And that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We have to explain what it means, because it
Right,
doesn't
'cause
mean the slogan.
right, and whenever, and too, when you have to spend a lot of time
Yes.
explaining it, we all think resources should be used differently. And right now, every time there's a riot, things are burned to the ground. Trump will come in with law and order, even though this is his America right now.
Right.
And so I think it's, be bold, but you need to be clear and tell people what that really, think of a better term. I worry about that every day.
Words matter. Words
Yes.
definitely matter.
So that was all over the map. I've thrown some quotes in there, but I do think that just to be a leader in anything, the listen, learn, help, lead, because you need to listen to other people. And just saying, God gave us two ears and one mouth for a reason, except when we're one-on-one like this,
Right.
you listen twice as much as you speak. And for too many people, it's all about them and not about the donor, the volunteer, or the voter. And you have to have a laser focus on who is your audience.
That's very true. Now, do you still have your business? Do you still work with candidates?
Well, I, again, in the reinvention mode, 2 years ago in August, I was offered a job at Texas Women's University in Denton, Texas, to launch their Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy. So after 39 years in D.C. with several sabbaticals to Nebraska and elsewhere, I sold my house and moved to Texas. I've moved back to Ohio,
Right.
to help care for my mother. But yes, the business has never really closed, but the business now has evolved. Since 2007, I really focused more on teaching, writing, and speaking. I've worked in 28 countries, Russia 10 times, my biggest failure in life. But I work overseas to help women, but I still, as you well know, speak all over the U.S., especially to nonpartisan women's organizations,
Right.
giving them the tools so they can run for office. Now that I'm back in Ohio on month 3 of the new and reinvention of how to run a business here, my focus still really is preparing people to lead. And how can we, how can I teach you how to ask for money even if you hate to? Because there's a process that we can go through. So women are not so intimidated when they're
Right.
asking for money.
When I was first elected county chair, that's the one thing I had to get over quickly was asking people for money. I will admit that was
Yeah.
uncomfortable in the beginning. Yes,
It is. And yet, once you get the rhythm and you can figure out,
yes,
what is it that person needs? What do they expect from you? And you just have to know going in that if 15% out, people say yes, you need to go open up a bottle of champagne, right?
right.
Because and just because somebody tells you no today doesn't mean it means no tomorrow. You've got to keep those. You have to keep those doors of communication. And here's my so all my students think that I'm still young and hip. I have a slide in my presentation that fundraising, it's not Tinder, it's eHarmony, right? Fundraising isn't a one-off. This is a relationship that you are building. You are remembering to
Ooh,
thank
that's a good one.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
good one.
really, yes, when I spoke to the American Farm Bureau, I put a farmersonly.com up there and they just thought that was great. But it is not a one night stand, right? Just because somebody tells you no today doesn't mean that doors close forever, because polling may come back. There may be, you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
And people can change their mind, or often it's the wrong person who's asked. A car dealer should ask another car dealer, what are you doing to manage those relationships? But it is developing that donor relationship is the best thing you can do.
Well, that's great advice. And do you have anything closing that you would like to? Well,
No.
if someone wanted to bring you on, or someone else wanted to talk to you, or take some of your services, where can they find you? Is there a website?
Oh, yes, of course. Can I type in here?
Yes, you can.
Okay, let me. I learned how to use this new platform tonight. I'm trying to figure out where do I type on here?
On the side where
Yeah,
it says
I
public.
see. Oh, got it. Okay, let me see if that's going to open up. Okay, I'm typing, but I'm not seeing anything. But then again, my screen has been frozen ever since the beginning of the call. So I can't even see myself. And maybe
Well, we see you perfect. Well, after the broadcast, I'll type it under the
So just so we know
comment
it,
section.
it's please do. It's N Bocskor. It's NBOCSKOR at Gmail. And my website is nancybocskor.com. I do have a fundraising book called Go Fish, How to Catch and Keep Contributors. And it is a step-by-step guide on everything you need to know, from here's how to host a house party, and all of these things to help you prepare to be a better fundraiser. But my biggest thing is I fly in, and whether it's ready to run, which I've certainly done in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia for Chatham University.
Okay.
But it is teaching women so they can succeed and be and really take that seat at the table, because we need everyone's voice.
Very true. And we will end with that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Delightful. I'm so glad we reconnected. Happy to help. And remember, go vote on election day, because voting is your American superpower. People die all around the world just to be able to vote. And no one is going to be a perfect candidate. You have to go.
Very true.
Very
I have
good.
my vote.
Thank you.
I have my vote necklace on.
Oh, good.
I'm copying my former first lady with my vote necklace.
I know, we all need them. Well, thank you for inviting me. It was delightful.
Thank you.
Delightful to see you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.